Move the Mouse here, and I wanted to talk about some tips and tricks for managing traffic without mods in City Skylines. So for those of you playing on PC, you've got a ton of different tools at your disposal, including things like Traffic Manager President Edition, which can make managing traffic within the game a lot easier. But if you're playing without mods, maybe you just want the challenge of the vanilla game, or if you're playing on console, you don't have the access to mods. So we've got to get creative about some of the ways that we deal with traffic, as it's an inherent problem in every city in City Skylines. So the city that I'm using as an example today is called Wood Garden, and if you want to see how it was built from the ground up, you can check out my Let's Play Season 6, where I built this from the very first stages all the way up to what you see today. Taking a look at traffic, you can see that I'm at 90%, and I have a couple areas, specifically in the industrial area, which are responsible for that 10% slowdown. Everywhere else, it's flowing pretty well. We've got another industrial pocket over here. It's a little bit heavy, but things aren't getting backed up to the intersections. They're not, backing up onto the highway. It's a little slow here where the toll booths are, but that's okay. Things are flowing pretty well. And I want to talk about how I achieve this using a couple easy tips and tricks and guidelines when you're building your cities up. First things first, and we need to talk just very briefly about road hierarchy. If we start here on the roads tab, we're going to work our way right to left and think about intersections and how often they should be occurring in your city. Basically, the bigger the road, the less often you want intersections to occur. So you can see here with my highways, we've got, 2 intersections on screen. If I scroll down over here again, we can see 2 intersections, but that's about it. We don't want the highway intersections too close together. And then as we step down to smaller and smaller roads, our intersections can get closer and closer. So ideally you want your larger lanes, like the 6-lane avenues, to handle as much traffic with minimal intersections, although you can see I've got a fair amount of intersections coming through here. When we get into smaller roads and the 2-lane streets, that's when our intersections can get even closer together. And ideally, these are going to be handling smaller zones or residential traffic. If we zip over to the other island here, I've got a residential district on the right, an IT cluster in the middle, and a commercial sector on the left. It's important to consider where your Sims are trying to get to. So when they start out their workday, they're going to be at home. They're going to travel to office or industrial or commercial. And then on the way home, they might stop at commercial for food or shopping before arriving back at their residence. So being smart about your zone setup is definitely one thing that can contribute a lot to traffic. If the zones are mixed poorly or not set up along the right routes, you could definitely run into some problems. In this center section of the city, I've got a couple different roundabouts that bring traffic all the way through. And again, there's fairly minimal intersections on this main avenue, where when we start to turn into the side streets, you'll see that there's intersections much more often, every 10 units or so, whereas over here on the main strip, they're about 30 units apart, to minimize any of the potential slowdowns that happen at those intersections. Now, public transit can be a huge help for the traffic in your city, but you don't necessarily have to give it away for free. It does help get more people onto things like the subways and buses and trains, but you're losing out on a lot of money, and you can still encourage plenty of people to take those routes if you provide effective routes for them to get around, again, from where they live to where they want to get to, either work or commercial for shopping and entertainment. Now, I've achieved 90% traffic flow in this city, and I've done it with basically only metros. So you'll notice I have no bus lines, I have no trams, I have a ton of metros, no trains, and 1 ferry line is the only other thing that I really offer in terms of people getting around via mass transit. So I've got a ferry stop that goes here, stops at my park, and then delivers people over to my casino island, which is otherwise disconnected. There's no other way to get there other than this ferry stop. But if we take a look at the metros, you can kind of see what I've done here is I've defined certain stops as kind of hubs for an area. And one definite busy area where a lot of different lines cross is right here at my university. And I've got 2 lines here. I've got one that's dumping out here, and you'll notice a ton of foot traffic coming over to this other station where they're transferring over here. And they don't have to be right next to one another. They can be, as you can see, a couple blocks apart, basically. It can be a decent walk for them, and people will happily make that. Also, you'll notice that I've got a footpath, a bridge path across the river here, And this is also not too far for people to walk. So consider that when you're setting up footpaths, is people will walk pretty far if it gets them to where they want to go. But let's take a look more at the metro lines and kind of see what I did over here, because this for me is one of the biggest things you can do for your city is do effective metro lines. And how I've done this is, again, with some hub stops. So you'll notice that 2 lines meet right here. Sims will transfer from line to line. So this green line carries people through the residential neighborhood, and then down here to the university stop where they can transfer to maybe the red line, which takes them across into the center of the financial district. And then they'll happily jump lines if they wanted to, say, come down into residential or come down into commercial. And then all those sort of link up right here at this station. You can actually see what color lines the people in the station are waiting for. All the white icons that you see getting onto the train right now, those are all heading into the residential area. All the green ones are heading into the commercial, and all the red ones are heading down into the financial district. But they can all meet at this hub stop to go anywhere on this island, but also to the other island over here, which is our kind of industrial sector for our ore business. So again, by providing these sort of hub spots where 2 lines meet but don't necessarily continue on, could be a really effective way for dealing with traffic. I've done the same thing at a couple different stops. So where we've got the orange and green lines meeting there, I've also got a stop here next to my one monorail line that runs traffic up and down my main street. Over here on the other half of the city, I've got a couple different lines that support over here. The purple line, the blue line, and the red line, which comes to the airport, all kind of meet up right here in this general vicinity. So again, as long as the transport routes aren't too far apart, people will happily take metro to get to monorail, to get to yet another metro stop. You could combine this with things like buses. The thing that's a downside with the buses is they themselves introduce traffic. And depending on where you have your stops, if you don't have dedicated bus lanes and you don't have as much room for a turnout as you might need, sometimes the buses can actually cause backups in traffic. So although they are a useful concept on paper, they're not necessarily the best practice when you have really narrow streets like I do in my residential areas. I mentioned before about road hierarchy, but there's also the key concept of where to place your highway exits. And here you'll notice that I've got a couple different highway interchanges. The main highway that was kind of built into this map of Wood Garden covers this area up at the top of the map above our city. But then I've got different T intersections that bring traffic off into other highways. So this feeds into the industrial area. Then it goes into an option that people can tunnel under and come out over here to get to this industrial area. We've got highway exits reasonably spread out where we can dump into multiple parts of the city. And then over here, this highway carries people into here, as well as delivering them back around towards this side, towards the ore industry. So we've got a number of different options for people to get around. Spacing out your highway exits appropriately is a really key step in having successful traffic in your city. If we come into city policies, there's a few worth looking at when you're considering dealing with traffic problems in your city. One is free public transport. So this will increase the use of public transportation, but you get no ticket income for it. And as you can see, I'm doing just fine around 90% traffic without the free public transport option. But it is, again, a nice way to encourage more people to get on there. And if you're doing fine money-wise, it may be worth turning on if you're trying to solve traffic problems in your city. A few other things that you can look at are potentially banning heavy traffic in certain areas. So if you want to keep heavy traffic, say, out of a residential area, you could create a district, apply the heavy traffic ban to that district, and it will prevent trucks from traveling through there. The thing to keep in mind, though, is that if you do this to commercial areas of your city, it can negatively impact them because they need trucks to receive deliveries. It's important to note that this does not affect highways, so if you want this to really have an effect, you need to make sure the district it's applied to covers some sort of road that is not a highway to prevent trucks from coming over there. Another useful policy is encourage biking. Even without dedicated bike lanes, you'll still see plenty of citizens using their bicycles to get around the town, and it can be a nice way to reduce some of the burden on traffic. If you do provide dedicated bike lanes, it'll increase this effect as people have easier routes to get around. So something to consider is maybe adding some bike lanes around kind of key areas or avenues that the Sims are traveling most heavily on, and you should see a reduction in traffic in that area. This last policy I want to bring up though is my absolute favorite. And you'll notice I don't have Old Town turned on citywide. I do have it turned on every single district though. So if we go into districts and paint districts, we can define logical areas for different parts of our town. And you'll notice that I've defined a ton of them, and they all have, for the most part, their own highway access coming into the city. And they define kind of these key areas around my town, but they all have Old Town stamped on them. And basically what Old Town does is define a district and say that only residents and businesses in that district can use the area for motor vehicles, ban all other traffic. So kind of along the lines of the heavy traffic ban, if I define something like Old Town on a commercial sector, it would prevent anyone that doesn't live or work in that area or isn't delivering something to that area from using it, but it doesn't prevent those that live in there. So they're free to use as many cars as they want as long as they're staying within that zone. But as soon as they are branching out to go someplace else in your city, they'll either need to find a highway route to get there, preventing clogging up of the smaller roads, or they'll take metro, walk, or bike there, one of the other routes that we've set up. But it is a huge, huge help, and I can't overstate it enough. It's amazing what that policy did to my city in terms of its traffic once I turned that on. Again, if we look at info views and traffic, I'm hovering pretty consistently around 90%, and sometimes it goes maybe down to 89, 88, but sometimes it goes up to 94 as well too. I haven't come back here to resolve some of the traffic problems that I have in my industrial area, but I know where that heavy traffic is, and it's not affecting any of the citizens. It's only affecting the businesses in these really heavy industrial areas. You can see that I've got a ton of factories and nonstop traffic coming through here. If we play it at 3 times speed, you kind of get a better feel for kind of where some of the slowdowns are, like right here. One other trick you can do if you have mass transit is use some of the additional highway options that you have, including the 2-lane and 4-lane highways. And what you can do here is, by default, if I have a 3-lane highway, the right lane can be exit or go straight. But up here, what I've done is I've kind of pinched these highways down so that immediately in between the exit and on-ramp of the Cloverleaf, I've shrunken that down to a 2-lane highway. And what that does is basically force the right-hand lane to be exit only. Traffic continuing on is going to take one of these 2 lanes, which then makes the merger up here much smoother because they're not committed to that right-hand lane. Although they are immediately shifting over there, they're not technically taking up that right lane. So traffic coming on can just speed right onto the highway and drive right on by. Then I've done the same thing over here on the other side, and pinching the traffic lanes like this can be a really huge help because it forces the AI to recalculate where they should be and generally improves traffic flow quite a lot. The Cloverleaf is not the most efficient thing in the game. In fact, it can be a bit of a nightmare because you've got this traffic getting onto the highway. At the same time, you've got traffic trying to shift over to get off immediately after it. The problem is not these 2 exits. This is what you want. You want traffic getting off the highway to get off before you're introducing new traffic. But the problem with the center of the Cloverleaf is the exact opposite. You're introducing traffic before these cars, which might potentially be getting off. So in that sort of a scenario, the lane pinch here makes a huge help, and definitely something that you should check out if you have mass transit as an option. I'm going to get into some of these concepts in a bit more detail, each in their own videos. We'll talk about things like Metro and how to set those up best as possible. I'll even get into a video on things like bus routes, even though they're one of my least favorite things in the game, because I feel that they introduce more traffic than entirely solving some of the problems that they're supposed to resolve. But hopefully you found the tips and tricks in this video useful. There's definitely a wealth of mods that you have access to if you'd like to improve your traffic in your city on a PC build. But again, if you're doing it without mods, or if you're on console and don't have access to mods, it's really useful to understand some of these basic mechanics for making your city flow a little bit more efficiently. Let me know if you'd like to see more videos like this in the comments down below. If you did enjoy this video, likes, comments, and shares all help the channel a lot and are greatly appreciated. If you're new here, subscribe for more and consider hitting the bell to get updates in this and other series. Follow me on Twitter and join the Discord. Stop on by there if you've got questions. It's a really helpful community, fans of City Skylines and of the channel, and we'd love to have you stop by. But until the next one, this is Move the Mouse, signing off.